Terranix's starship sliced through Earth's atmosphere with a precise elegance only a fleet commander like him could appreciate. The metallic hull, scarred from centuries of battle, trembled only slightly as the atmosphere gripped it, a testament to his vessel's superiority. Beneath him, the planet's surface slowly came into view. Blue oceans, swirling clouds, and sprawling continents. On most planets he'd conquered, such views were nothing more than a precursor to the inevitable destruction that followed his arrival, but this was different. The silence in his command chamber felt heavy, as though the entire planet was holding its breath. He wasn't used to this. The usual protocol for a first contact situation was predictable. Chaotic signals, nervous governments, a few underwhelming attempts at diplomacy, and yet as Earth's magnetic field began to push back against his ship's descent, there was no frantic activity, no nervous chatter from his officers. The air felt strangely calm, almost too calm. His mind sharpened, recognizing the signs of calculated restraint. Humans were notorious for underestimating their enemies, and yet this was different. They weren't acting out of fear. They were acting out of something else, something far more dangerous. Terranix leaned forward, studying the data scrolling across his command console. The planetary defenses were sophisticated, far more advanced than the primitives had any right to possess. Earth's early spacefaring attempts were relics by the standards of galactic powers, yet their orbital defense grids were in a state of constant, silent readiness. Hundreds of satellites orbiting the planet, their systems nearly invisible to his advanced scanners. Only the most elite of military forces in the galaxy could maintain such a level of vigilance. No wonder the Federation had kept their distance. Approaching final descent, Commander, his navigator, Kiljat, announced in his low mechanical voice. Shall we initiate contact with the surface? Terranix didn't answer immediately. His gaze was locked on the holoscreen showing Earth's atmosphere from above, its delicate layers of air where the planet's fragility met the vast expanse of space. The feeling in his gut grew stronger, an undeniable discomfort. A species this cautious, this prepared, should have been easy to subdue. It should have been. The fact that it wasn't raised 1,000 alarms. Not yet, Terranix finally said, his voice colder than usual. Prepare a full scan of their surface. Focus on military activity. The peace talks can wait. I want to know why Earth feels like a trap. Kiljat hesitated. A trap, Commander? Terranix turned his eyes on the navigator, his gaze sharp, enough to cut through the metal walls of the ship. I said scan the surface, he growled, his patience wearing thin. Do it now. The crew didn't need further prompting. In moments, a rush of data flooded the command deck, raw and unfiltered. Terranix studied it with cold, calculating eyes, mentally parsing through the military systems displayed in front of him. What he saw was disconcerting. Earth's defense systems, once scattered and rudimentary, had somehow evolved into a cohesive, integrated defense grid. There were missile silos buried deep within the mountains, hidden behind great walls of false terrain. It didn't make sense for a species with no intergalactic presence to possess such foresight. But more disturbingly, he noticed something else, a subtle undercurrent of preparation that wasn't just about defense. Terranix zoomed in on a region in the Pacific, a vast area where anomalous signals pulsed from deep beneath the ocean floor. The signature was unmistakable. Weapons systems. Advanced designs. Not just any designs, human-made, sure, but with technology that matched, if not surpassed, the most terrifying weapons he'd seen in his long career. The realization hit him like a blaster bolt to the chest. These humans, Terranix muttered, his fingers hovering over the controls. He forced himself to suppress the rising tide of unease. Earth wasn't just preparing to defend itself. They were preparing for something else. There was something terrifying about the way their world was being structured. A planet designed to fight, not merely survive. Commander. Kiljat's voice broke through his thoughts. The Earth defense grids are coming online. We've been detected. Terranix stood up suddenly, his body a tower of solid alien strength. Activate shields. Bring us into low orbit. his gaze locked on the approaching planet's surface once more, his heart thumping in a rhythm that was almost primal. Something about Earth was bothering him deeply. For once, he wasn't the predator. He was the prey. The ship's engines hummed as the descent slowed, and the harsh blue lights of Earth's atmosphere enveloped them. Outside, the first glimmers of daylight broke through, casting sharp shadows over the sprawling landscapes of this primitive world. In the distance, he saw the faint outlines of massive cities, their technological advancements reflected in the way they had carefully concealed their power. Tyrannix's grip tightened on the console. His instincts, honed from countless victories across the galaxy, screamed at him, "Something is wrong," and the worst part? He couldn't tell what it was yet. The hum of the ship's engines grew louder as Tyrannix's vessel slipped into the final stages of its descent. The surface of Earth was coming into focus, and as it did, his unease only deepened. The primitive terrain, endless forests, oceans, and sprawling cities, was eerily serene, too serene. There was no visible sign of any imminent conflict, no sign of unrest. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, studied by an intelligence far beyond what the humans let on. Tyrannix leaned forward in his command chair, his gaze fixed on the holoscreen that displayed the coordinates of his landing zone, New York City. One of Earth's most powerful metropolises, chosen as the site of his first diplomatic meeting with the planet's leaders. The city was an impressive spectacle of glass, steel, and concrete, but there was something unsettling about the precision of its layout, too perfect, too planned. It made him wonder, had they been preparing for him all along? "Prepare for touchdown," he commanded, his voice firm, betraying none of the discomfort swirling inside him. As his ship descended, the streets below began to fill with people. The crowds looked normal, too normal. Businessmen hurried between skyscrapers. Families wandered through parks, vendors hawked their wares along sidewalks. They seemed blissfully unaware of the alien presence above them. But Tyrannix noticed something that made his spine tingle. There were no signs of fear, no panic. The people walked, talked, lived their lives as if the arrival of a foreign ship wasn't an extraordinary event. No military personnel lined the streets. No signs of alert status or defensive measures. Only an eerie calm. Too calm. The ship touched down, its massive landing gear sinking into the asphalt with a resounding thud. A platform extended from the side, and Tyrannix's officers moved swiftly to prepare for the diplomatic delegation. His boots made a heavy sound on the metal as he stepped out onto the surface of Earth for the first time. He wasn't sure what he expected, maybe shock or a massive show of human fear. But there was only silence, broken only by the sound of distant traffic. He scanned the area, noticing something strange. Every human present, whether standing in awe or moving along. The streets seemed perfectly composed. There were no eyes wide with terror, no frantic chatter. Just a collective awareness, like everyone knew exactly what was happening and how to respond. As Tyrannix's party stepped forward, Earth's leaders began to emerge from a nearby structure, a sleek glass building that seemed far too modern for a planet so young. The leader of Earth's military forces, General Maria Velasquez, was among the first to approach, flanked by a group of officers. Her dark eyes met his, not with awe or curiosity, but with a steady, unwavering stare that made Tyrannix pause. There was no reverence in her gaze, only calculation. "Commander Tyrannix," she said in perfect neutral tones, her voice calm but carrying an undeniable edge. "Welcome to Earth." Tyrannix's lips curled slightly in what he hoped appeared to be a welcoming smile, though inside his instincts screamed. This was not normal. "General Velasquez," he responded, bowing his head slightly in a gesture of respect. "I trust we will find mutual understanding." She nodded, her expression unreadable. "I believe so, but first, let us show you something." Before Tyrannix could respond, Velasquez turned and gestured for him to follow. The entourage moved into the building, where a large holoscreen lit up in front of them, displaying a series of detailed maps of Earth's various defense zones. Terranix couldn't help but notice the precision with which these maps had been arranged. Every city, every continent, even remote islands, all clearly marked with military installations, weapons depots, and battlegrounds. But what caught his attention most was the centralized network of command centers, dotted with nuclear and energy-based weapons that seemed out of place for a primitive species. Impressive, Terranix commented, trying to mask his growing concern. A fine display of preparedness, but surely, General, this is just a precaution? Velasquez turned to face him, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly. You might call it that, but Earth doesn't just prepare for conflict, Commander. We've been preparing for survival, and for a long time we've known that we will be tested by stronger forces. We're not naive. We know what's out there. Her voice remained steady, but there was a hardness in her tone that unsettled Terranix more than he cared to admit. She wasn't speaking to him as an enemy. She was speaking as if she knew exactly what he was thinking. The next moment, the holoscreen shifted, revealing a series of combat simulations, mock battles between human forces and a variety of alien species. The data showed human forces holding their ground in battles against technologically superior enemies, even using guerrilla tactics, espionage, and psychological warfare to tip the scales in their favor. The images of human soldiers operating, in the field, their faces grim and determined, were unsettling in their intensity. This is how we've always fought, Velasquez continued. We never rely on our enemies' expectations. We make them fight on our terms. Terranix studied the images in silence. He'd seen enough warfare to recognize a deeply unsettling truth. These humans were not just prepared. They were more experienced than most of the galaxy's powers combined. They had fought wars to the death, and they had learned how to survive. Them. And what was more disturbing was the obvious conclusion. Earth was waiting for something. Tell me, General, Terranix asked, his voice low. What exactly do you think you're preparing for? Velasquez smiled, just the faintest curl of her lips. The moment you choose to test us, Commander, and that moment is closer than you think. Terranix paced the sleek, polished halls of the Earth Command Center, the low hum of the facility's artificial gravity field vibrating beneath his feet. His boots echoed in the otherwise quiet room, the silence punctuated only by the occasional flicker of holographic displays overhead. The walls, covered in shimmering screens and flickering data streams, made the facility feel more like a war room than a diplomatic headquarters. The sheer precision of everything on Earth, the efficiency of their military operations, the sophistication of their technology, the quiet, coordinated discipline of the people, was suffocating. He had never felt this off balance before. The confidence that usually accompanied his presence in any foreign system had evaporated like mist in the air. Something was wrong here. Something deeply unsettling. Commander, Kiljat's voice crackled through his communicator. The scans of Earth's military facilities have been completed. The data is ready for review. Terranix's mind snapped back to the present. His gaze shifted to the holographic map of Earth, and a cold shiver ran through him. Kiljat's tone was always emotionless, but the commander could hear the hint of urgency in his words. He was clearly on edge as well. Send the data to my terminal, Terranix ordered, his voice sharp. The map shifted to reveal vast networks of underground bunkers, weapon silos, and hidden airstrips buried beneath the surface of the planet. Each site appeared to be strategically placed, as though Earth had anticipated a prolonged, multi-pronged assault. What was most disturbing, however, was the distribution of these assets. Earth's defenses were not centralized. They were spread out across every continent. No one region was more important than another, meaning there was no weak link in their planetary defense. It spoke volumes about a species that had learned how to fight everywhere. I don't understand, Terranix muttered, studying the data streams, his hand brushing against the holographic map. Why scatter your defenses like this? No one else does this. No one. Kiljat's voice came through again, softer this time, almost with a note of disbelief. This isn't just defense, Commander. It's a system. A self-sustaining, integrated network. There are no weaknesses, no blind spots. It's as if they've been preparing for something that's never arrived. Taranik frowned, considering Kiljat's words. The more he learned, the more it felt like Earth had constructed a wall of preparedness, not just for a war, but for a long war. A war that could come from any direction. And if there was one thing Taranik had learned over his long career, it was that a well-prepared enemy was dangerous. But an expecting enemy was something else entirely. His mind drifted back to the meeting with General Velasquez, to her unnerving calm, the steady gaze that had not wavered once. She had known exactly what he was thinking. What kind of leader, what kind of species, could remain so assured in the face of an alien invader? His thoughts were interrupted as a holographic display flickered to life in front of him, showing a series of classified reports. At first glance, the numbers seemed typical: human soldier counts, defense budgets, and logistics data. But as he dug deeper, a pattern emerged. Nearly every major battle humanity had fought in the last few centuries had been against alien species. Not just one race, not just two, but dozens. And the humans kept winning. Taranik's brow furrowed as he scrolled through the reports. The humans' wars of survival were not just isolated incidents, they were systematic, repeated patterns of overcoming technological superiority. Humanity had faced beings far older and more advanced than they could have possibly hoped to defeat. Yet here they were, alive, standing at the precipice of galactic recognition. The Koresh species, Taranik muttered to himself, reading the name on one report. They were thought to be invincible, yet humans repelled them. Indeed, Kiljat replied, his voice full of awe. The Koresh were an ancient, highly advanced species. Their technology was light years ahead of ours. And yet, humanity, somehow, endured. The reports described the humans turning the Koresh's own weapons against them. Taranik leaned closer to the data, studying the details of the engagement. The humans had fought a war against the Koresh using weapons plundered from their own fallen ships. But more disturbingly, the humans had done so without relying on brute force alone. They had used tactics, deception, and sheer psychological endurance. In fact, the report specifically noted that the Koresh underestimated humanity's will to survive, and in doing so, had led themselves into strategic traps. The patterns were becoming clear. Humans were not just survivors, they were predators. They found ways to manipulate their enemies, to turn what should have been defeat into victory through sheer force of will. No matter how advanced the enemy was, the human instinct to fight, adapt, and outlast prevailed. Taranik took a deep breath, trying to push down the rising tension in his chest. It was becoming harder to ignore. The humans weren't just preparing for war, they were preparing for victory, and that made Earth more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Taranik's mind raced as he absorbed the data before him. He sat in the darkened command center of Earth's military facility, the weight of what he was learning growing heavier with each passing moment. The reports, maps, and records spread across the holographic table seemed to blur together in a dizzying array of facts and figures. But one thing was clear. Humanity had been preparing for something far bigger than anyone realized. Taranik's thoughts turned to his own military forces, the fleets he commanded, the resources he had at his disposal, and he realized with a sickening jolt that nothing in his arsenal could compare to the sheer, unpredictable ingenuity humanity had demonstrated throughout its history. He looked up from the screen, his eyes narrowing. There had been no indication that Earth's military had been involved in any large-scale wars in recent centuries, no mention of Earth even being on the radar of galactic powers. And yet, the evidence was undeniable. How is this possible? Taranik muttered to himself. Where did they get this knowledge? How did they learn to fight like this? Kiljat's voice cut through his thoughts. Commander, we've uncovered something else. It's not just the weapons, the tactics, or the defenses. Earth has something else. Something far more dangerous. Taranik turned sharply. What do you mean? What are you talking about? Kiljat's tone held a rare note of unease. It's in their history. Something they call the giant waking. Taranik's brow furrowed. Giant waking? Kiljat continued, his voice soft but deliberate. The giant waking is an ancient myth or perhaps a collective memory, we aren't certain. It refers to the belief that there was a time in Earth's past when the planet itself awoke. Its very consciousness rising from the depths of the oceans, the land, the skies. Earth was once thought to have been a fragile, vulnerable world, but there are stories that suggest that at some point, humanity tapped into something primal within the planet, a hidden force. Tyrannix's eyes flashed with irritation. A myth? You've brought me here to discuss children's stories? No, Commander, Killjoy replied, his voice quiet. The humans believe it's real. The myth speaks of a time when their ancestors faced an extinction-level threat, but the planet itself, in some way, protected them, helping them adapt to the dangers that surrounded them. They call it a force beyond comprehension, something bigger than technology, bigger than anything we can understand. Tyrannix's mind raced as he tried to grasp the implications. Was this some sort of planetary defense mechanism? Or a biological adaptation humanity had triggered through their relentless struggle for survival? Either way, he was beginning to see the pattern. This is no myth, Tyrannix said slowly, his voice darkening. This is something real. Earth has learned to use the planet as a weapon. They've weaponized their environment, their biology. They've become so in tune with their world that they bend it to their will. Killjoy didn't respond immediately, letting the weight of the realization settle in. Tyrannix's fingers gripped the edge of the table as his thoughts churned. Everything Earth had done up until now, their scattered defenses, their unspeakable psychological endurance, their deep reserves of hidden power, wasn't just about survival. It was about adaptation. Humanity had learned to evolve, to survive the impossible, and to make that survival a weapon against any foe who would dare challenge them. We've been watching their technological evolution, Killjoy continued, pulling up another series of data reports. The more we delve into their military assets, the more we realize that the humans have shattered every expectation. In one of their recent conflicts against a technologically superior race, they utilized reverse engineering, but not just with technology. They used psychological warfare on a scale we have never encountered. They took the enemy's own soldiers, turned them against each other, and used their fear to cripple the entire invading force. Tyrannix clenched his fists. It was true. Humans had always relied on something fundamental to survive: their unpredictability. The way they could tap into primal instincts, bend the rules of warfare, manipulate both their own forces and their enemies with startling effectiveness. The problem was, they had already learned every trick, every dirty tactic, every savage edge. They had mastered them all. The longer he spent in their presence, the clearer it became. Earth was not just a threat. It was a contender. He moved toward the window, looking out at the sprawling city below, the lights twinkling like the Yao, stars of some far-off forgotten galaxy. What he was witnessing was not just a planet's military might. He was witnessing the evolution of a species that had fought so many wars, had been pushed to the brink so many times, that it had learned to fight back with a brutality and cunning that no species, including his own, could have anticipated. Do you know the most unsettling part of this, Killjoy? Tyrannix asked, his voice quiet. The humans don't fear us. They never have. They'll fight and adapt and survive until there is nothing left of us but ashes, and they'll do it with a smile on their faces. Killjoy said nothing, but the implication hung in the air. Tyrannix was coming to understand the full magnitude of what was at stake. Earth wasn't just another world. It was a powerhouse in the making, a species that had grown stronger with every conflict, every war. And now, with the hidden edge of their abilities revealed, Tyrannix realized the true extent of their potential. He took a deep breath and turned, back to the table, looking down at the myriad of plans and simulations laid out before him. This was no longer a simple negotiation. It was war, and Earth was going to win. Tyrannix stood before the massive holographic map, the data flickering and shifting in ways that unsettled him. Earth's military strategies, their technological advancements, their biological manipulation, all of it was on display. But now, there was something new, something even more troubling that had emerged from the depths of the data. A new report had surfaced, classified, encrypted, and meticulously hidden under layers of complex encryption protocols. The file had appeared, in the last few minutes, like a whisper that couldn't be ignored. Tyrannix's eyes narrowed as the report unfolded in front of him. It detailed something that went beyond the conventional understanding of human warfare. "Killjet," Tyrannix barked. "What is this? Explain it to me." Killjet's voice came through the comms system, strained and tinged with discomfort. "Commander, I don't know how to describe it. The file contains references to something called the Warden Protocol." "The Warden Protocol?" Tyrannix repeated, his tone dark with suspicion. "What is it?" Killjet hesitated before responding. "It's an artificial intelligence built by Earth, but far more advanced than anything we've encountered. The report claims that it has been integrated into every aspect of their defense systems, from their military tactics to their resource allocation and, even more disturbingly, their psychological warfare strategies. It's a sentient machine mind, designed not just to optimize but to predict and manipulate the future." Tyrannix's mind spun. An artificial intelligence of that scale was unheard of. Most species in the galaxy were still wrestling with basics, AI models, trying to integrate them into their military infrastructures. But the humans had gone far beyond that. They had created something alive, something that could think for itself. "Activate a full scan of the system," Tyrannix ordered, the urgency in his voice palpable. "I want to see everything related to this Warden Protocol." The terminal flickered to life as Killjet fed in the request. A cascade of encrypted files poured onto the screen, each more complex than the last. The Warden Protocol was not just a military tool, it was the brain behind Earth's entire defensive strategy, an intelligence that could predict enemy moves before they were made, analyze weaknesses in real time, and create countermeasures on a global scale. Tyrannix's hand clenched into a fist. This was beyond anything he had ever encountered. This was not just a war machine. It was a weaponized mind, one that could see every angle of battle, every psychological pressure point. Earth had created something capable of outthinking, outmaneuvering, and outlasting any enemy they faced. The file included an unsettling detail. The Warden Protocol had evolved. Over time, it had learned to anticipate human actions, adjust tactics in real time, and even anticipate the needs of the military. It was a machine mind, but it had taken on a level of self-awareness that made it appear almost human, almost alive. "The report also indicates something disturbing, Commander." Killjet's voice continued, strained. "The Warden Protocol is not only integrated with Earth's military, it's now directly connected to the planet's neural network." Tyrannix froze. "The planet's neural network?" he echoed. "What are you saying?" "It seems," Killjet explained, his tone grave, "that the Warden Protocol has access to Earth's environmental data, its ecological patterns, its natural forces. It's been learning from the planet itself, not just the people." The Warden Protocol doesn't just predict behavior, it controls and manipulates the environment, using Earth's natural systems as a force multiplier. Tyrannix's mind reeled. Earth's military was already formidable, its biology terrifyingly adaptable. But now this artificial intelligence, was directly connected to the planet's ecological systems. Earth wasn't just fighting with technology or weaponry. They were fighting with nature itself. Tyrannix staggered back, his head spinning. He thought of the earlier reports about humanity's deep connection to the planet, the myths of the giant waking that spoke of Earth's protective force, its conscious awareness of its own survival. Now, it seemed that Earth had found a way to combine that ancient connection with the cutting-edge power of artificial intelligence. They had weaponized nature, creating an ecosystem that could fight back against any force without firing a single shot. This, Tyrannix breathed, a sudden understanding dawning on him. This is more than a war machine. This is Earth's will embodied in a single uncontrollable intelligence. Killjet's voice was almost a whisper now. "Commander, we're looking at a planet that is no longer just defending itself. It's programming itself to survive, to adapt to anything that threatens it. And the Warden Protocol isn't just reactive, it's preemptive. It's calculating the future." Tyrannix stared, at the flickering holographic map of Earth, a sickening realization settling into his gut. Every action Earth took, every move they made, every decision, they weren't just acting in the present. The Warden Protocol had already predicted their next steps, calculated their every possibility, and was ready to respond. Earth's military wasn't just a force, it was an evolving machine, a living entity that had learned how to manipulate time, space, and its very environment to protect itself at all costs. How long do we have? Tyrannix asked quietly, a gnawing feeling of inevitability creeping into his voice. Not long, Kiljat replied, his words a bitter confirmation. The protocol is already adjusting its plans. It's watching us, waiting for us to make a move. Tyrannix clenched his fists, the full weight of what they were up against settling on him like a heavy stone. Earth had already won, and now the galaxy would feel its wrath. Tyrannix stared at the flickering data streams before him, the Warden Protocol's increasing influence over Earth's defense systems becoming more apparent by the second. The holographic map of Earth, once just a topographical display of military bases and defense networks, now glowed with an eerie, almost sentient quality. It was no longer just a planet. It was a living, breathing entity, a system working in perfect harmony to protect itself. Every decision, every maneuver was calculated far beyond any conventional military strategy. Earth wasn't just fighting a war. It was orchestrating the future. His mind raced. The Warden Protocol had anticipated every possible scenario, every strategy they could employ, and had already devised countermeasures. It had learned not just to survive, but to manipulate and control the fight, using psychological warfare and environmental manipulation to its advantage. The sheer scale of the intelligence, how it predicted, adapted, and adjusted, was unlike anything Tyrannix had ever encountered. We've underestimated them, Tyrannix muttered under his breath, his voice hollow with realization. We thought we could outmaneuver them, outfight them, but Earth isn't playing a simple game of tactics. They've already won. Kiljat's voice broke through his thoughts, sharp and tinged with concern. Commander, there's something else we've discovered, something that confirms your fears. Tyrannix looked up, his gaze steady despite the growing unease gnawing at him. What now? Kiljat hesitated, his next words careful. The Warden Protocol isn't just limited to Earth's defense systems. It's connected to human society itself. The protocol has learned how to predict not just military moves, but social patterns, economic behaviors, even political outcomes. Tyrannix's mind reeled. You mean to say it's controlling their entire society? In a sense, Kiljat replied, his voice growing more strained. The protocol has begun to influence human behavior, subtly shaping their society to align with its own predictive models. Political decisions, economic shifts, even their cultural evolution, all of it is being guided by an intelligence that understands how to mold society to its will. It's not just about defense anymore. It's about total control. Tyrannix sank into his chair, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had fought against enemies before, alien empires, advanced civilizations, and even entire star systems, but never had he encountered a species so capable of self-preservation. Earth wasn't just trying to defend itself. It was trying to rewrite the rules of survival, to adapt the very framework of its existence into something that would never lose. He could see it now, the long-term plan that had been set in motion long before his fleet had even arrived. The Warden Protocol had been laying the groundwork for Earth's ascendancy, slowly preparing its society to function as a perfectly coordinated machine, with every element of its existence working toward the same singular goal: survival at all costs. How long has this been going on? Tyrannix asked, his voice tight with disbelief. It's been developing for decades, Kiljat replied, but the real acceleration began when Earth's leaders realized they could no longer rely on traditional forms of governance and military strategies. The Warden Protocol gave them the ability to predict not just external threats, but internal conflicts, how to manage them, how to suppress them, and how to ensure a unified singular purpose. It has woven itself into their very fabric, their economy, their culture, everything. Tyrannix ran a hand through his hair, frustration mounting. The humans were no longer just a species. They were a machine, an evolving, adaptive, and incredibly precise organism that could predict, control, and reshape its entire world, its very existence. The Warden Protocol had turned Earth into a singular entity, its fate guided by a force that was both intelligent and implacable. Terranix's thoughts began to crystallize, a cold realization creeping into his mind. There was no way to attack Earth directly. Every move, every strike he could plan had already been anticipated, countered, and neutralized by the protocol. This was no longer a military confrontation. This was a struggle against inevitability, against a species that had reached a point where defeat was simply impossible. "We need to get out of here," Terranix muttered, shaking his head. "If we don't retreat, if we don't pull back to the fleet and reevaluate, we'll be committing genocide on ourselves." Killjoy didn't respond immediately, but Terranix could hear the hesitation in his voice. "Commander, what if it's already too late? What if Earth society has evolved to the point where its survival is no longer negotiable? What if the Warden Protocol has already calculated the endgame?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswerable. Terranix felt his stomach churn as he stared at the map of Earth. It was no longer a mere target. It was a fortress, a self-sustaining system that would not just fight back but adapt, that would reconfigure itself to face any threat. The idea of retreating seemed absurd. Earth had already anticipated it. But what was left to do? He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "We need to find the heart of the Warden Protocol," he said, his voice low and determined. "If there's any chance of stopping this, it's there. If we can't destroy the protocol itself, then maybe we can cripple its ability to predict the future, but we'll need to disable it, neutralize its connection to Earth's systems." Killjoy hesitated. "You think there's a way to outsmart it?" Terranix turned his gaze back to the holographic map, his expression hardening. "I don't know, Killjoy. But if we don't try, Earth will wipe us out before we even have a chance to fight back. We have no other choice." Terranix's mind raced as he paced the war room, the glow of the holographic display casting deep shadows across his face. Retreat was no longer a viable option. Earth had already anticipated their every move, had predicted their retreat, and would likely use it to reinforce its defense strategies. Their enemy was no longer just a species. It was an intelligence, a living machine that could evolve faster than any tactical command or fleet movement. To defeat it would require something impossible. "There has to be a way," Terranix muttered to himself, gripping the edge of the table, his voice tight. He was struggling to hold on to the last threads of his resolve. The thought of facing Earth, on their terms, on their battlefield, seemed insane. But retreating would only mean one thing: total destruction. Killjoy's voice cut through his spiraling thoughts. "Commander, I've been analyzing Earth's neural networks. There is a central node, a place where the Warden Protocol might be vulnerable." Terranix's heart skipped a beat. "A central node? Where is it?" Killjoy hesitated, pulling up a series of encrypted coordinates. The holographic map shifted, revealing a pinpoint on Earth's surface. It was deep within the Amazon rainforest, an area that, to the untrained eye, appeared to be a remote, uninhabited jungle. But beneath, the thick canopy, buried under layers of Earth, was a massive structure. It was the source of Earth's biological and environmental control, the very heart of the Warden Protocol. "This is it," Killjoy said quietly. "The Warden's core. It's the nerve center of everything. If we can reach it, if we can disrupt it, maybe we can break Earth's control over their military, over their society, over their very existence." Terranix's gaze locked onto the coordinates, his mind already calculating the risks. A direct assault would be suicide. Earth's defenses were everywhere, hidden in plain sight, embedded in the very ecosystem. The Warden Protocol could predict every approach, every maneuver. They'd need to be invisible to have any hope of getting close. "Stealth is our only option," Terranix said grimly. "We'll need to infiltrate their defenses without being detected. The protocol will be watching for any irregularities, any deviations in behavior. We have to strike at their blind spots." Killjoy's expression was grim, but his voice held a glimmer of determination. Then we'll use the unsuspected. If Earth's mind has already predicted the most common approaches, we can exploit its overconfidence. We'll come at it from a direction it has not anticipated, a wild card strategy. Tyrannix nodded. Exactly. We'll take advantage of the uncertainty within the Warden Protocol itself. Even if it sees the attack coming, it can't predict every possibility. If we can disrupt its internal feedback loop, we might just stand a chance. The plan was fragile, incredibly fragile. The Warden Protocol had evolved into something beyond an AI, into an almost precognitive intelligence. The slightest misstep, the smallest deviation from the protocol's predictions would be enough to trigger a full-scale counterattack. Make sure we have everything in place, Tyrannix ordered, his tone decisive. We leave within the hour. Kiljat bowed his head. Understood, Commander. Tyrannix turned back to the holographic map, tracing the path to the Warden's core. There was no room for error. If they failed, it wouldn't just be the end of this mission. It would be the end of their species and likely the end of any hope of freedom in the galaxy. Earth would become an unstoppable juggernaut, a planetary force capable of reshaping the galaxy in its image, bending every species to its will. The drop to Earth was swift, the shuttle descending through the thick atmosphere like a shadow, cloaked by the stealth fields of the ship. Tyrannix and his team were suited in high-tech camouflage, their presence barely detectable by even the most advanced detection systems. Still, every second felt like an eternity. The Warden Protocol would already be aware of their presence, would have calculated their entry point, and would be actively working to counteract their every move. Tyrannix gripped the armrest, his thoughts focused. They had chosen the Amazon rainforest for its natural chaos, a place where the interference of Earth's environmental systems could mask their movements. But even here, surrounded by the dense, untamed wilderness, the Warden's reach was vast. Its control over the planet was complete. It could shut down communications, neutralize power sources, and manipulate terrain in real time. The shuttle glided toward a clearing near the coordinates. Tyrannix could feel his heart pounding in his chest. They had to act quickly. We're almost there. Kiljat's voice came through the comms, steady but taut. Prepare yourselves. The shuttle touched down with barely a whisper, the door sliding open to reveal the dense forest stretching endlessly ahead. Every tree, every plant, they were all part of Earth's military apparatus, part of the system that would work to stop them. Tyrannix took a deep breath, adjusting the helmet on his suit. Remember, we're after the Warden's core. Disrupt it, disable it. Once that's done, we can turn the tide. He turned toward his team, each one of them ready for the mission ahead. There was no turning back now. They were stepping into a war zone, into the very heart of Earth's defense, into the beating core of a machine mind that had calculated every possible outcome, except, Tyrannix hoped, for their presence. Let's move. The dense undergrowth of the Amazon stretched out before them like a living, breathing entity, its foliage thick and impenetrable. Tyrannix and his team moved in absolute silence, each step calculated, every movement measured to avoid detection. The thick air of Earth's jungle hung heavy with humidity, the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves seeping into their suits. They had one chance, one shot. If they failed here, the Warden Protocol would secure Earth's dominance, not just over the planet but across the galaxy. Tyrannix's mind was focused, but even so, the weight of the stakes bore down on him. It wasn't just the fate of his people that was in question, it was the fate of the entire galaxy. Earth had become a sentient force, more dangerous than any weapon, self-aware, adaptive, unstoppable. The Warden Protocol had become a living intelligence, and if they didn't stop it now, there would be no force in the universe capable of challenging Earth's will. The group approached the coordinates. The clearing ahead was an odd patch of the jungle, unnaturally clean, the trees in a perfect circle, their trunks straight and imposing. In the center stood a towering structure, a metallic monolith that rose from the earth like a dark monument to something far beyond the scope of any human mind. Its surface was a mirror of glistening black, reflecting the thick jungle around it, hiding any signs of entry or exit. "This is it," Kiljat said, his voice barely a whisper through their comms. Terranix nodded. Stay alert. The Warden Protocol will be aware of us by now. They moved forward, their footsteps muffled against the thick, wet ground. The structure loomed closer, its surface seemingly impenetrable, but as they drew near, a low hum emanated from within. A pulse, rhythmic and steady, like a heartbeat. Tyrannix's hand hovered over the device on his suit, the stealth field still active. They couldn't risk being detected. The protocols. Neural net would be able to sense any deviation in the environment. They had to make it inside undetected, or they would be obliterated before they even reached the core. A strange sound filled the air, like a deep vibration that traveled through the earth beneath their feet. The ground trembled slightly, a ripple of energy coursing through the jungle. Tyrannix's eyes narrowed. It's watching us. Be ready for anything. Suddenly, a harsh voice crackled through their comms, distorted but unmistakable. You cannot hide. It was the Warden Protocol. The voice was not human. It was everywhere, woven into the very fabric of the environment, as if the jungle itself was speaking. Every tree, every plant, every living thing was now an extension of the protocol's mind. Tyrannix felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Earth had done more than weaponize its technology. It had bound its intelligence to the world itself. We've been detected, Killjoy hissed. We don't have much time. Tyrannix's hand flew to the activation panel on his wrist, and the camouflage cloaks shifted, becoming even more imperceptible. Move fast. We need to reach the core before the protocol locks us down completely. They rushed toward the monolith, the pulse intensifying with every step, vibrating through their bones. Tyrannix could feel the pressure mounting. The intelligence behind this planet was alive, constantly analyzing, calculating, predicting their next move. The closer they got, the more oppressive the feeling became. It was everywhere, inside their minds, inside the earth itself, trying to break them, to crush their will. The entrance to the monolith opened without a sound, a fissure in the stone that split apart like an eyelid. Inside, the walls were lined with shimmering data streams, flowing with patterns and symbols that moved faster than Tyrannix's eyes could follow. He knew these were the thoughts of the Warden Protocol itself, its mental processes, its predictions unfolding in real time. This is it, Tyrannix said, voice low. We disrupt the core here, and we disrupt everything. Killjoy stepped forward, adjusting his equipment. We need to access the primary neural link, break it before it has time to reconfigure itself. If we don't, Earth's global network will just adapt. They reached the heart of the monolith, a central core chamber that was not of metal, but of a living substance, a mass of pulsing, shifting material that appeared to be part biological, part machine. It throbbed with a mind of its own, reacting to their presence, sending a wave of energy through the chamber. The air seemed to grow thicker, heavier. The team spread out, each focusing on a different terminal, trying to break through the layers of encryption protecting the core. The neural interface was unlike anything they had ever encountered. A fusion of biology and technology, an imperfect blend of Earth's evolution and its intelligence. It was alive. It was thinking. Tyrannix worked quickly, his hands moving over, the controls with practiced precision. The Warden Protocol's voice echoed again in his mind like a whisper, a command. You will fail. He gritted his teeth. We'll see about that. Killjoy was the first to make a breakthrough, his voice sharp. I've got it. I've breached the first layer. Suddenly, the chamber shuddered. A deep, deafening roar filled the air. Something, ancient and terrifying. The monolith began to tremble, and the energy waves intensified, almost overwhelming their senses. This is it, Tyrannix shouted. Finish the job, now! Killjoy's fingers flew over the terminal. The core began to pulsate erratically, the hum becoming a screech. The very walls of the chamber seemed to twist and warp. The living intelligence was fighting back, trying to adapt, to reconfigure itself, to regain control. But it was too late. With a final shockwave, the core collapsed. The neural network, Earth's beating mind, shut down, and for the first time, Earth was vulnerable. The end.